to yet another episode of the Economic Times Cutting Chai Stories, a series of conversations with managing directors and chief executive officers over chai or coffee, if that's your preference, brought to you by ETH. The urgency and pressure on business leaders as they navigate the COVID-19 pandemic has been immense, to say the least. These business leaders have been constantly monitoring myriad ways to ensure that their respective companies stay on course in the new normal. The incredible demands placed on them makes us often wonder how they have time for family, hobbies, or any downtime at a personal level. And let's not forget that they are mere mortals. This initiative by ETH is aimed at creating a deeper connection with them and to get a sense of what business leaders of several prominent companies do when they are not in business mode. Today, it's my pleasure to host Srivatsan Iyer, Global Chief Executive Officer, Hero Future Energies. Sri, welcome to the Economic Times Cutting Chai Stories.
Thank you, Evan. Happy to be here.
Wonderful. COVID has impacted all of us, the entire world. And at least in my lifetime, I've not seen a pandemic as such. 19 months now, closing in on 20. My question to you, Sri, my first question is pre-COVID to post-COVID. How has your approach towards life, family, and the community changed? Could you share that with us, please?
Absolutely. Thanks, Ivan. And I think great question, very topical given what we're all going through today. I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine a week back when he said, it's almost a where were you when COVID first hit kind of question, right? And I said, well, it was, March of last year. And I was one of those who believed, COVID was, I'd say, a flavor of the week or a flavor of the month in the news cycle, and it would soon pass. It was a time when I was still traveling almost every week on business. So I had all my air tickets, in place.
Okay.
And I canceled the first week and I said, oh no, by the second week, I'll be back on the road because COVID's going to go away, right? And a year and a half, almost 2 years later, here we are, right? Nobody's traveling. Everybody's more or less, working at a home. Life, work, friendship, relationships, everything as we know it has undergone, several structural changes. And I think the big change all of us have had, the first one is really staying home and being forced to, I'd say, adapt to a schedule that was not normal at that time. I think caused a lot of us to just think about, what we're doing, right? What's our role? What are we working for? What does it mean, to be with family and friends? And as COVID spread and, I'd say in many ways started to get personal in a sense that, we all knew people who were impacted by it, whose family members were impacted. And, I'm sure many of us know, people and friends and family, who even had tragic deaths in their family. I think that caused an even deeper rethink in terms of, what is it that we're doing here? And, we got so caught up in the rat race, waking up in the morning, running to work, getting back. We never took time to sit back and, focus on things that were really important. So for me itself, I actually switched roles. I switched companies, I switched jobs right in the middle of COVID, so a year back. And gave me time to just think about what's really important is to form meaningful relationships with people at work, friendships. Certainly, I'd say focus on the family, focus on friends, and make sure that we take the time to recognize that that's important. That's the number one priority. Work is important. I'm not saying it's not, but work has its place and work can wait, if that makes sense. Right? Yes. So we keep telling everybody, telling ourselves, look, if you have to choose between work and, relationships, friendships, life, choose that first. Yes. And you can always get back to work because work is not going away. Work is here, permanently. So true. I think all of us, I don't think I'm unique in this, but I think many of us have really, had this opportunity to sit back, reevaluate what we're doing, what we're going through, and, start to think about what's really important in our lives.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, that's the universal theme, Sri, that I've been listening to. And that's about it. It was a great leveler, wasn't it, Shri? I mean, nobody was spared, irrespective of
Right.
color, nationality, class, rich, poor, and I think the true meaning of the word empathy.
Right.
We use that word very often, but I think that came to the forefront because you could
Right.
relate to everything that was happening because it was happening to us at an individual level.
Correct. Correct. Absolutely. And I think the other thing that, at least for me, became something that I never quite gave enough thought to, which is, I think it actually accentuated the economic or class differences in society. I think all over the world,
Yeah.
our kids were forced to stay home and attend school virtually.
Yes.
And I suddenly sat back and thought about the millions of kids globally who don't have access to the internet, who don't have a computer, whose schools don't offer virtual education. And
Yes.
what are they going through? And how are they adapting? And how are they impacted by this? And that's really the first time I really, it hit home and I started to think about these questions. Things
Yes.
that are, always kind of at the back of the mind, but that you never actually focused on. So that's been, I guess, another, I'd say, revelation for many of us, which is uh, we all think we are shielded by this, and we could spend time at home and stay safe. There
Yes.
are millions of others who just were not quite as fortunate, and you talk about the lives versus livelihoods,
Yes.
and that's certainly something that's more relevant for so many people today that we didn't necessarily think of before.
Yes. Yes. As a follow-up to what you just said, and I know you talked about the workspace in terms of the reflection and forming meaningful relationships. But I'm going to ask you this question: pre-COVID to post-COVID, has there been any change in your leadership style?
Yes, I would say absolutely yes. And I'd say in different ways. Like I said, I switched jobs in the middle of COVID. In my previous job, I'd been there, a little about more than 10 years. So I already had a deep personal connection with the people that I worked with. And so, obviously switching to a COVID virtual mode brought about certain changes, but not necessarily structural changes, because I had, I already had an existing relationship.
Right.
But starting a new job and then, being, 7,000 miles away, introducing yourself over Teams and Zoom for the first time. That's when I realized, look, it's okay to think about business. It's okay to think about, the colleagues I work with and what their roles are in the company. But it's a whole lot more important to get to know them as individuals.
Yes.
With the advantage of, being in the same room and shaking hands, being absent, I had to find new ways to connect with them individually as people first. And so I focused more on that aspect, I'd say, in the first 6 months or so that I was in the role. Then entirely, I'd say, business meetings and, let's talk about numbers, let's talk about strategy, let's talk about what we're doing operationally. I tried to spend a whole lot more time trying to understand them and, the pressures that they were going through. And, the issues that they were facing as individuals, and try to connect with them, however hard it was virtually. Rather than jump right in and say, no, let's look at the business, let's look at meeting our targets and so on.
Yes.
So, and I think that will probably continue now going forward, because I suspect this is some here to stay.
Right.
And again, it emphasizes the importance of forming the relationship first, without first diving into business topics.
So well said. Thanks for taking that question. Wonderful. Shri, you're a global CEO. You have to think about plans, the future, 5 years, 10 years, even longer, where you're going to go with the organization. How do you balance planning for the future while being present for your employees?
Yeah, great question. It's a tough balance. And I think if anything, COVID has taught us over the last 2 years, the best laid plans, right, have to be scrapped pretty quickly. And I forget who it was who said, you can plan strategies all you want till you get into the boxing ring and the first punch lands, right?
Right.
And then you just react. So it's a balance between thinking about, what do we have to do 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. I think what really has happened over the last few years is, instead of forming these grand 5 and 10 year plans, you've got to have a series of, I'd say, visions that you're walking towards, but keep the flexibility to turn on a dime and say, look, the world has changed, therefore we need to switch direction. So,
Right.
Getting from A to B is no longer a straight line.
Right.
And the hardest thing is to try to explain that to an entire organization of 300 people who are looking for a 5-year plan, and talking to a board who say, what's your 5-year business plan? And why is it that, at the end of year 1, your business plan has changed? And, trying to convince the stakeholders, trying to convince the people who you work with, is that if the world changes, you'd better be changing equally quickly, or in many ways anticipate what's going to change and be a little ahead. And that agility or flexibility is absolutely critical. And that's where I think communication with everybody is critical, especially with your own people.
Yes.
Tell them why it is. Otherwise, from their vantage point, they look at you and say, this is Brownian motion. This guy has absolutely no idea what he's doing. So he's bouncing off walls every 6 months,
yes.
right? And dragging us in a new direction. So I think it's really crucial for us to not just think about, how to adapt, but make sure that everybody understands and you communicate to them the rationale for why you're doing what you're doing. So, and I think myself, as with many others, we're still learning how to do this effectively.
Wonderful, wonderful, great response. Yeah. You're a successful leader in your own right, and you've seen throughout your career many more leaders across industries, so on and so forth. My question to you is, what, in your opinion, are the most important attributes of successful leaders today?
I'd probably point to 3 distinct dimensions. I'd say, just to reel them off, it's trust, respect, and delegation, right? You have to trust your people. The reason you hire them is because you think they can do a job. So you have to trust them to do their job and then delegate to them effectively. If you have to make all the decisions, you don't need people around you, right? It can be a one-man company and you say, look, I'm going to do everything. I don't need anybody around me.
Right.
And lastly, respect their skills, right? And respect for everybody, no matter what their role in the organization. And I think part of that has to do with a certain lack of hierarchy, right? So it's not that the CEO knows best or the CEO's is the most important job. In our company, we have roughly 300 people. In my previous company, we had about 8,000 people. I looked at myself as one among 8,000 or one among 300. I had a role to play. I had a job to do, much like everybody else has a job to do.
Yes.
But to break it down to hierarchy and say my job is more important than yours, really, I think destroys the reality of how our companies run. Because in the end, everybody's job is important.
Yes.
And if those pieces are missing, everything else can crumble as well. And so again, I say it's trust, respect, and delegation. And I think that really are the hallmarks of leaders that I've always admired and leaders that I've really enjoyed working with and working for.
As you were speaking, Sri, I was reminded of this quote by Jack Welch, where he says, before you are a leader, success is all about growing yourself. When you become a leader, success is all about growing others. And I think you encapsulate that very well in your response. I think
that quote sounds really good. Yeah, I need to remember that.
Yeah. I think the next question is related to what you said, but I'm still going to ask you this. How do you foster a positive work environment? There are so many challenges as the CEO. The pandemic for one, people working remotely, aspirations of people, competition within teams. There is a chance for, a certain amount of negativity to creep in. People want to grow. How in this maze do you foster a positive work environment, Sri?
Yeah, it's tough. And I'll tell you that in the absence of personal interaction. And so over the last 12 months, I've spent about 3.5 months or so in India with the team, with everybody. Even though, given COVID, we asked everybody, don't all of you show up at the office at the same time, right? You don't have to do that. It's a couple of things. And I think this, again, is not true just of me individually and the people I've worked with. I think one of the things COVID has allowed us to do is to think about the purpose in our lives.
Right.
And I think the purpose is a little more important today than, the role or the designation or the salary that comes in. And I think a lot of people have suddenly begun to place greater importance on, is what I'm doing worthwhile, right? And so it starts off by talking to everybody either on one-on-one or small groups, whether it's in person or Teams or Zoom, to say, look, what we are doing is worthwhile. There's a higher purpose to what we are doing, and it's good. And can we all agree on that? And does that fuel us internally,
Yes.
without needing any external motivation or incentives?
Sure.
So one is to kind of repeat that message, right? Are we all here to do something together, right? To do something meaningful, to do something transformational. The second is, there's always ups and downs in business, and I think there's a lot of people who get stressed by deadlines, by things that need to be done, by ups and downs in the business. Things don't always go as you planned. The key is to foster an environment that says it's okay, right? You don't have to be stressed. You wake up tomorrow morning, the sun will still shine, and we can work to fix things. So don't let work bear you down, bring you down. If you put it in context, suddenly you look at work and say, look, there's always going to be ups and downs, but it doesn't have to cause you any undue stress, right?
Right.
And so if you bring that element of, look, you're doing something worthwhile, but don't let it stress you. And thirdly, it's okay to relax and have fun and have a good time.
Sure.
With family, with your colleagues, with friends. So let's focus on those, right? Let not work be the center of your world, and the ups and downs and the vagaries of your work life shouldn't affect you emotionally. So I think that's kind of what I'm driving towards in all my interactions with people. Let's just go and have fun every day.
Yes. Wow. Wonderful. So refreshing. Great. I'm really enjoying this cutting chai conversation with you, Sri. My next question to you is, let's see. I'm very keen to know the response to this. How much of a role has luck played a factor in your professional life, or has it just been about Sri, who's had the qualifications, the experience, and Sri's hard work, and that's where you reached today as the global CEO of Hero Future Energies. So was there any luck factor?
I'd say life has been a series of good luck events that have happened to me, as I look at it. And I can actually go all the way back to high school, right? And we were
right.
Lakhs of students were writing, the IIT entrance exam back then, right? And they only had 2,000 or so that they were admitting. And once I got in, I suddenly realized on that given day, it could have been another set of 2,000 kids at IIT, because the difference between the ones who were in and the ones who narrowly missed is very, very small. And it probably boiled down to, right, did they have a cup of coffee in the morning, right? Did they get distracted? Did they make one silly mistake, right?
Yes.
And I look at that and I suddenly, once I got in, I said, boy, was I lucky that day? I was lucky to have gotten in, whereas I could easily have been outside and, there could have been somebody else there in my place.
Yeah.
And so if I look at luck, I think it's played a fairly central role every time. And I've kind of bounced around a bit, right? I came to the US, took up a job, and same thing, you look at that and say, I don't think I was the only person who was good enough to have gotten that job. I think there were probably thousands, right? But was I just in the right time at the right place? Did I just happen to know the right person that I talked to at the right time, who said, oh, look, there's an opportunity, and, would you be interested in looking at it? So if you look back at it dispassionately, without, patting yourself on the back for doing a great job, you suddenly realize, boy, it was a series of wonderful events that guided you, at least me, from place to place.
Right.
And so that's the way I look at my career now, going back, the opportunities I've gotten, the jobs I've got, is it could easily have gone a different way. And so I hate to look back at myself and say, look, I deserve everything, I did everything better than everybody else, and, I kind of outcompeted everybody else.
Right,
It could easily have worked out any other way and any other step.
right.
But as I said, right, I've been, I think, lucky enough to have a lot of good luck at every step of my career. So,
Thanks for answering that. As you were speaking about IIT, I'm going to quickly share something personal.
yeah.
Um, I had given my entrance exam for entrance into one of the colleges in Bombay called SPJN.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get a call back. So those were the days when you used to get telegrams,
Right.
So I didn't get a call back. You will not believe this, Sri. One day before admissions close, there is a lady whose surname was Rodriguez, as is mine. The
Right.
telegram went to the wrong Rodriguez. There was a death in the family. That's the reason why she didn't come 3 days
Oh,
before.
boy. Okay.
And she came to a house, delivered it. I ran, picked it up, gave the fees just an hour before the deadline.
Oh, boy.
Was I lucky or not? Because I wouldn't have been an MBA from SPGN at least at that point in time. But I know you've been very humble in terms of what you just said. And I in the 15 minutes interaction that we've had, you come across as a very humble person. But I was told this once by my CEO. When people talk about luck, and you actually talked about yourself, but let me tell you, this has stuck with me. And what he said was, Ivan, what's luck? When preparedness meets opportunity, people term it as luck. So I think at every step, whether you were in the right place at the right time, you were prepared, Sri, and there was an opportunity, and that's why that thing happened to you, and that's what I believed.
That's the second thing I'm going to carry with me. Preparedness meets luck, and the other one is the Jack Welch code. So right. I'm going to file these away for future use.
Okay.
No, but that sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, great. Sri, who is your friendly ear? Someone who listens to you without judging.
Certainly my wife, she doesn't take me very seriously, right? So I can easily talk to her about, what I'm doing and, where I've succeeded and where I'm not. Professionally, there's a very close friend of mine in my previous company. He and I worked very closely together for 10 years. We spent a lot of time both in the US and in Brazil working together. And there are times where I just need to bounce ideas off, or there are times I just need to vent, and we do, something called a virtual happy hour, right? We get on Zoom, share a glass of wine, and throw some ideas off of each other. So that's what I typically do with him. And we talk about all topics in the world. It has nothing to do necessarily just with business. So, but I think it's really good for everybody to have one or two people where they can, I'd say, just open up and just share their thoughts, and somebody who doesn't take them, I'd say, too seriously.
Yes.
Who can give them, I'd say, very honest, not just feedback, but just have an honest conversation.
Sure.
So yeah, these are, I'd say, the two people that I talk to the most on anything.
Wonderful. My final question to you before we wind up this part of the conversation, Sri, is, as a leader, how do you measure success?
Boy, that's a complicated one. So if you look at in terms of traditional ways of measurement, you look at it and say, have I created value for shareholders? Are the shareholders happy that you're there and you've done something? I think more than that, especially again in today's world where you have to rethink, your role and what you're doing in a company, it is, are the people who work with you happy that they are where they are, and are they, challenged, and are they producing, right? When I say producing, are they happy working and doing what they like to do? And I think the business results is an outcome at that point of time, right? So for me now, the focus on people probably trumps everything else, especially where we are today and what we've all collectively been through over the last almost 20 months or so. And so I've changed my views a bit because of COVID. Prior to that, I was, I'd say, very numbers focused in my previous roles as a business leader, where I'd spend a lot of time looking at the numbers and the gaps to targets, and dive down and why is this happening and that not happening. I think I've spent a whole lot more time since COVID thinking about, let's talk about the people and why are they not challenged? Why are they not happy? Why are they not performing as individuals? And I think if you can get to the bottom of that, then the business results, I think, will automatically follow. And so look at that as an outcome and not as a result that you're necessarily targeting.
Here's another quote for you, because what you said, I think, is encapsulated in this quote. And this is by Henry Ford. He said, coming together is a beginning. Staying together is progress. Working together is success.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. So I think you kind of, this, I think, underlines exactly, you talked about success and you talked about the team and then succeeding. So, and we talk about teams and this coming together and then, and then staying together is something, because when you have an organization on a path, you want that core team to stay together, everyone. And then having stayed together, working together to reach the company goals. I think I like this quote very much, and that's success.
I really like that too. So that's the third one. I'm now going to
third one. Well, Sri, I had a wonderful time engaging with you on this edition of the Economic Times Cutting Chai Stories. Friends, that was Srivatsan Iyer, Global Chief Executive Officer, Hero Future Energies. Sri, on behalf of the Economic Times, I wish you, your family, and Hero Future Energies the very best going forward.
Thank you so much, Ivan. Really enjoyed it. And, thanks for the opportunity to talk to you. It was wonderful.
Our pleasure entirely. Okay. What I'm going to do at this stage is welcome Subranil Bose, Director, Very Large Business, Enterprise Business, Lenovo India, to join us.
Thank you, Ivan.
Okay.
So, hello, everyone.
Hi.
Very nice to be here.
Wonderful. Good. So thanks for joining, Sri. And I have one question for the both of you. You can decide whoever wants to go first. And let me pose the question first. What were the IT infrastructure, I beg your pardon, challenges faced by your organization in 2021? Is there any innovation that we saw during this time, and how can we prepare ourselves better for the upcoming years? Who would like to go first?
I would suggest if Sri can take that.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Subranil. Again, going back to COVID, and I like to think of a series of things that happened. I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but certainly did change the way we work. Microsoft Teams, or the entire Office 365 suite, and programs like Zoom. If we think of rewinding, if COVID had happened 10 years back when we didn't have these kind of tools, we would have been in quite some trouble in the corporate world, right? In terms of giving people the right kind of infrastructure and tools to work out of home. And so we think of IT infrastructure challenges. I actually look back and say, boy, it was quite seamless, because of the quality of the IT infrastructure in place all around the world. And, most of us companies, we have calls with people in all different geographies and all different companies, all different time zones. And what's really heartening and refreshing to see is how well all of this actually worked through the pandemic, without a lot of advanced preparation, because literally from one week to the next, the world had to turn a switch and say, everybody work out of home. And so I look at it as challenges. Yeah, they're fairly minor compared to how well things are actually working. But going forward, if you look at this as being the new normal, right, I think you need a whole lot more in terms of the tools, the robustness and the reliability of the infrastructure, as well as give people the right kind of setup at home to be able to use all of this, right? And again, we think of high-speed internet access. Perhaps not everybody has it, right? And that was the critical lifeline today for people, connecting with others and being effective. So I don't look at it as much as challenges, but I'm actually looking at it as how lucky we were that we had all the things that we did. So we didn't really miss a beat through the period of COVID.
Thanks, Sri. Yeah, great. Subranil, your views?
Yeah, actually, thanks, Ivan, and thanks, Sri. I think the views in my organization were whatever we faced is pretty much similar to what Sri just talked about. And it is wonderful to have these technologies. I think the bigger challenges which our organization faced, and or I would say also opportunities, is that what our customers in enterprises, like one of where Sri belongs to, how do we address their concerns, their challenges? And these were two-faced. One is that there were challenges, and at the same time there were opportunities. The challenges were about work from home. How do you get people quickly from office to working as efficiently or closer to that from home? Second is kids learning from home, and also the adoption, huge adoption of digital technologies, because that is one area which is getting absorbed very, very fast and very, very rapidly by the industry. So one thing was to do that, and the second thing was to do that very, very fast. And the technologies were rapidly changing. The embracement of the technologies was very, very rapid. And that is something which was the key thing, which as our company, we embraced to and we helped our customers.
Wonderful. Great. Subranil, Sri, thank you for your responses. Great time.